Today meets to receive testimonies on the posture of the U.S. Central and African commands. We welcome our witnesses, General Votel and General Waldhauser, and thank each one of you for your great service. In advance of this hearing, Chairman McCain asked that I submit a statement for the record on his behalf. I will quote that statement, quote, "As we turn our attention to the central challenge of great power competition, the National Defense Strategy challenged us to think about our efforts in the Middle East in new and different ways. With all of the recent success in the fight against ISIS, we must work to consolidate our gains and move forward with a coherent regional strategy to ensure security and stability." Unquote. This committee looks forward to working with this year's National Defense Authorization Act to provide the policies and authorities needed to adjust to this new approach. Both the Middle East and in Africa, where the threat of violent extremism is increasing dramatically. For Centcom, over the past year, we have seen remarkable progress in the fight against ISIS. Your military victories in Mosul and Raqqa and beyond have helped dismantle the caliphate ISIS once claimed in the Middle East. At the same time, significant challenges remain in the region. The Syrian civil war rages on. Iran continues to grow its influence and fund its proxies. According to the region, we face serious questions about the Kurds, many of whom have fought by our side valiantly. For Africa, let me make Africom. I'll make one statement that I think is significant for us to keep in mind for the purpose of this hearing. General Waldhauser, it's my understanding the investigation into the October 2017 ambush in Niger by ISIS-affiliated fighters that killed 4 U.S. soldiers is completed. I understand it is now pending review by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dunford, and the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis. After his approval, Africom will immediately be offered a brief to the families of the 4 soldiers if they desire prior to any in-depth briefing to Congress. Obviously, we want the families to have an opportunity to know what happened to their loved ones. Accordingly, I understand that you are not able to comment on the investigation's results during this posture hearing. And at the conclusion of the briefs to the families, I know you will be providing us with a thorough briefing of the investigation's findings and recommendations. Now, we do want to talk about Africa and Africom. Our troops have an important mission there to train, assist, and regional partners so that they will be capable of handling security threats before they become global crises. Our engagements in Africa are critical not only to regional stability but to our own national security, but it lacks dedicated troops, resources, sufficient basing, and strategic access. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses for appearing today, for also your service and the service of the men and women you command, and thank you very much, and thank them, please. You are leading your commands in very challenging times. We are in the 16th year of military engagement in Afghanistan, for example. Early last year, General Nicholson, Commander U.S. Forces in Afghanistan, testified we were facing a stalemate. Since that time, the administration has announced a new South Asian strategy, articulated a negotiated settlement as the desired end state, moved additional forces into theater to support the military elements of the strategy, and curtailed security assistance to Pakistan. Despite these shifts, 2017 continued to be plagued by widespread violence and instability in Afghanistan as the Taliban expanded their territorial control and conducted a number of large-scale attacks against military and civilian targets. In addition, ISIS Khorasan remains resilient despite significant pressure. While the administration has clearly laid out a military strategy, battlefield victories are hollow without political and economic progress, both of which seem stalled in Afghanistan. However, the Trump administration has yet to articulate the political, governance, or economic aspects of the strategy, much less the associated staffing and resources that will be required to implement it. And General Votel, I'm interested in your assessment of the situation in Afghanistan. I'm sure all my colleagues are also. In Iraq and Syria, the destruction of the so-called physical caliphate previously enjoyed by ISIS is a significant victory, and I commend the administration and your leadership and your colleagues too for this U.S.-led international coalition, and our Iraq and Syria partners on the ground have done so much. However, ISIS is not defeated and will remain a threat for the foreseeable future. Additionally, the underlying issues that gave rise to ISIS in the first place remain unaddressed. We need strong U.S. diplomatic leadership to help bring about the necessary political accommodations that will give Sunni communities a stake in their future and to bring the international community together to assist communities recovering from ISIS. As some experts have stated, the seeds of the next insurgency are sown in the rubble of Mosul and Raqqa. Iraq alone, the cost of reconstruction is expected to be at least $88 billion, and the international community has pledged to support less than one-third of that amount. I'm deeply concerned that the administration's marginalization of our diplomatic corps undermines our ability to stabilize areas once held by ISIS, as well as the broader region. It is notable that across the Centcom and Africom areas of responsibility, a number of ambassadorial posts remain vacant, most notably in Jordan and Somalia, where I recently visited, but also in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Libya, and Egypt. And this is not a question of congressional inaction. No nominations have been forthcoming, and I'm sure our colleagues, all of them, would rapidly move to consider nominees for these very important positions. Military power alone will not be enough to address the national security challenges we face in these complicated regions in any enduring way, and we must have the people in place to help ensure our long-term strategic objectives are met. On Iran, the President risks creating a foreign policy crisis by threatening to withdraw from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. By all accounts, the JCPOA is working as intended, and Iran is verifiably meeting its commitments under the agreement. Let there be no doubt, Iran continues to be a state sponsor of terror and the abuser of human rights. Iran continues to destabilize the region through its development of ballistic missiles and support for proxies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and elsewhere. The JCPOA was not intended to address all of Iran's bad behavior, just the nuclear aspect. If Iran behaves this way without a nuclear weapon, imagine how much worse it would be with a nuclear-armed force. Withdrawing from the JCPOA would be a devastating blow not only to the Middle East, but also for our efforts diplomatically with North Korea and for any future diplomatic efforts to constrain aggressive behavior by our adversaries. General Votel, I'm interested in hearing if you, like Secretary Mattis and General Dunford, believe that remaining the deal is in the best interest of the nation. In Africa, the importance of relationships is paramount as we seek to engage by, with, and through our partners in the furtherance of our shared security goals. I recently traveled to East Africa, where I saw firsthand the ongoing efforts to disrupt violent extremists and build capacity with critical partners in places like Djibouti and Somalia. I also saw the challenges from competitors such as China and Russia, who are actively seeking investment and involvement across the continent. Despite some battlefield success against groups like Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and ISIS affiliates, many governments in the region have struggled to translate security gains into durable outcomes. As we turn our attention to the great power competitions articulated by the National Defense Strategy, we must be mindful not to focus exclusively on these issues at the expense of other threats such as terrorist organizations, rogue regimes, and other non-state actors and criminal organizations, issues that are unfortunately present in both of your commands. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, for your service.
Thank you, Senator Reid. We'll now have opening statements by our two guests, and your entire statement will be made a part of the record. General Votel.
Senator Inhofe, Ranking Member Reid, distinguished members of the committee, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the current posture and state of readiness of the United States Central Command. I'm pleased to be here today with my fellow combatant commander and fellow Minnesotan, General Tom Waldhauser of the U.S. Africa Command. I come before you today on behalf of over 80,000 members of the command, U.S. military, civilians, and coalition members from 71 nations. In the most complex area of the globe, they serve and sacrifice on a daily basis, in many cases for the benefit of not only American strategic interests, but also the world's. Our people are the very best at what they do, and they, and especially their families, deserve our admiration and gratitude. It is my sincere honor to lead and be a member of such a fine team of dedicated professionals. Since I last appeared before the committee last year, we have made considerable military progress across the region. However, As we consolidate our gains in places like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, we remain clear-eyed about the challenges that the region continues to present. In the past year, we have achieved incredible success against ISIS in both Iraq and Syria. The Iraqi security forces and the Syrian Democratic Forces are operating at their most effective levels and have liberated over 98% of the territory previously held by ISIS. The destruction of the ISIS physical caliphate is within our grasp, and thousands of displaced persons are returning home and beginning the long task of rebuilding. Now we must consolidate gains by investing in the security forces, relationships, and capabilities that will hold the territory and keep ISIS from returning. Based upon that progress, Centcom is conducting an operational alignment and rebalancing effort to achieve 3 goals. The first goal is to complete major combat operations in Iraq and Syria to bring the Defeat ISIS campaign to a responsible close. Military success in the campaign presents us an opportunity to reposition forces from Iraq and Syria to Afghanistan in a manner that keeps the pressure on ISIS, but also sets us up to break the stalemate in Afghanistan. We retain sufficient capability to continue our efforts against ISIS, despite the increasingly complex situation across Syria, and especially in the northwest province of Afrin. Our partners on the ground in Syria have gotten us a long way in Syria and toward our objectives, and we must stick with them through the completion of this fight. In Iraq, the Iraqi security forces are rapidly consolidating gains and preparing to support elections later this spring. The second goal is to prioritize the implementation of the South Asia strategy in Afghanistan, reaffirming our enduring commitment to Afghanistan by reinforcing the 2 complementary military missions, the NATO-led Train, Advise, and Assist mission and the U.S. counterterrorism mission. With our support, the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces are well postured to begin operations to seize the initiative, to expand population control, and secure credible elections. Part and parcel of this effort is our regionalized approach to engage all countries with a stake in Afghanistan's stability, especially Pakistan, where we seek a more productive and trustful relationship that benefits our mutual objectives in the region. The third goal is to ensure that we have aligned our military efforts with our broader interagency and international activities to neutralize, counterbalance, and shape the destabilizing impact of Iran. Make no mistake, Iran's malign activities across the region pose the long-term threat to stability in this part of the world. The recently published National Defense Strategy rightly identifies the resurgence of great power competition as our principal national security challenge, and we see the effects of that competition throughout the region. Russia's support of the Assad regime has not only propped them up, but has also added complexity to the Defeat ISIS campaign. Moscow plays both arsonist and firefighter, fueling tensions among the Syrian regime, Iran, Turkey, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the United States, and other coalition partners, then serving as a supposed arbiter to resolve disputes. Today, Russia's manipulative behavior has placed our campaign progress at risk with activities that are not focused on the defeat of ISIS, but rather preserving their influence and control over the outcome of the situation. China is pursuing long-term steady economic growth in the region through its One Belt, One Road policy, but it is also improving military posture and force projection by connecting ports such as Gwadir in Pakistan with its first overseas military base in Djibouti, adjacent to the critical Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Both China and Russia not only seek to fill in perceived gaps in U.S. influence with increasing defense cooperation and sales of their equipment to regional partners, but they are also cultivating multi-dimensional ties to Iran. Against this backdrop of increasing great power interaction are the enduring issues of the region: social, economic, and political challenges, high unemployment, falling oil prices, a youth bulge, large numbers of refugees, and long-standing border conflicts. We in Centcom stand ready with all of our partners to defend U.S. interests against these and other threats. Our strategic approach of preparing the environment, pursuing opportunities, and prevailing wherever we can is working. We are postured for purpose, proactive in pursuing opportunities, and resolved to win. I'd like to close by sharing 3 dynamics that we assess are essential to prevailing in this region. First, in the conduct of our campaigns in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Lebanon, and Egypt, we have adopted a by, with, and through approach that places a heavy reliance on indigenous partner forces. While this approach does present its own challenges and can be more time-consuming, it importantly provides local solutions to local problems. This approach is not without risk, as we are seeing unfold in northern Syria today, but it is proving very effective and will pay significant dividends going forward. Second, successful pursuit of U.S. objectives in this region comes only from an integrated approach aligned with interorganizational partners. Defense of the nation is a team sport. This applies not just within the command, but with our fellow combatant commands, the Central Region's 18 country teams, other departments, agencies, and organizations of the U.S. government, and most importantly, our coalition partners who have provided unwavering support for nearly 2 decades of persistent conflict. As the National Defense Strategy captures clearly, strengthening existing relationships and building new ones will be key to our future success. Finally, we could not do what we do on a daily basis without the support of Congress and, by extension, the American people. We sincerely appreciate this committee's continued strong support for our operations, authorities, and resources, and especially for your support to the services, SOCOM, and the other defense agencies that we rely upon for our military wherewithal. Your support will remain important as we contend with what potentially are generational struggles to defend our homeland from the threats outlined in our National Defense Strategy. Thank you again, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General Votel. General Waldhauser.
Senator Inhofe, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to update you on the efforts of United States Africa Command. I'm also honored to be here today with General Votel and discuss many of the concerns we share between Centcom and Africom, including countering violent extremist organizations. I would like to begin this morning by remembering the soldiers and sailors we lost on the continent during operations this past year. I also want to share my respects for the loss of our African partner forces who, during their efforts in the fight against extremism, gave the ultimate sacrifice this past year as well. We honor their commitment, service, and dedication to duty. And I offer my sincere condolences to the families of our fallen U.S. comrades and those of our African partners. Senator Inhofe, I have completed my review of the Niger investigation and forwarded the report to the Secretary of Defense through the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Once the Secretary completes his review and after the families have been briefed, I intend to provide a comprehensive and detailed account of the investigation to you as soon as practicable. This morning, I would like to talk to you about Africom's strategy for the continent and update you on our priority regional efforts. The U.S. interests in Africa are reflected in our mission statement. Africom, with partners, strengthens security forces, counters transnational threats, and conducts crisis response in order to advance U.S. national interests and promote regional security, stability, and prosperity in Africa. Our mission statement deliberately highlights the importance of with partners. Following up on this point, very few, if any, of the challenges on the African continent can be resolved through the use of exclusive military force. Accordingly, Africom's first strategic tenet underscores our military activities and is designed to support and enable U.S. diplomatic and development efforts. We can create time and space for governments to establish effective and accountable governance while fostering conditions for economies to develop. Our second theme describes our strategic approach of by, with, and through. This framework emphasizes our main effort to build the capacity of African partner defense forces to credibly provide for their own security. While African nations have enormous potential, they are often challenged by instability and exploitation stemming from the disruption caused by violent extremist organizations or VEOs. These VEO groups take advantage of vast ungoverned spaces and recruit from populations lacking economic opportunities. We approach these security threats through our third strategic principle of keeping pressure on the networks of VEOs such as Al-Shabaab, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Boko Haram in order to mitigate their destabilizing influence. At the same time, we remain postured and ready to respond to contingencies and to protect U.S. personnel and facilities on the continent. These strategic themes and Africom's approach are aligned with the national level guidance. In accordance with the recently released National Defense Strategy and in the context of changes in the operating environment, we are updating our strategy and theater campaign plan to reflect the guidance provided by the Secretary of Defense. Turning now to our regional efforts, I would like to describe for you some of the challenges we face each day on the continent. In East Africa, Africom's contributions are part of an international commitment to help Somalia implement their recently designed national security architecture. Al-Shabaab remains a threat to Somalia and the region, as demonstrated by their October 2017 bombing in Mogadishu that killed over 500 people. The challenges facing the federal government of Somalia are enormous. Nevertheless, they continue to slowly make progress, with a long way to go before they are prepared to secure their own territory. With international partners and organizations, including the African Union and the European Union, Africom's kinetic and capacity-building efforts to assist the federal government of Somalia with the implementation of their comprehensive approach to security sector reform. In North Africa, Libya remains politically and militarily divided, with leaders and factions vying for power ahead of potential elections later this year. In close cooperation with the U.S. Embassy's Libyan External Office located in Tunis, and as part of the international effort, Africom supports diplomatic objectives for political reconciliation. We will continue to work with the UN-established Government of National Accord and maintain pressure on the ISIS Libya and al-Qaeda networks in that country. The Sahel refers to the Sahara to Savannah transition belt spanning the broadest part of Africa from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. Africom supports multinational efforts in the Western Sahel and in the nearby Lake Chad Basin region of West Africa. We provide training, advice, and assistance to the G5 Sahel's countries and the Multinational Joint Task Force in order to help them contain violent extremism and secure their borders. In conclusion, the continued progress on the continent with our partners reflects dedicated efforts by the men and women of Africom. I am proud to lead these professionals who have built strong and trusting relationships with the U.S. interagency and with our international community in order to foster the security, stability, and prosperity on the African continent. On behalf of the service members, civilian employees, and families of the United States Africa Command, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Waldhauser. Just less than a month ago, Senators Ernst, Rounds, and Sullivan and I spent quite a bit of time in the South China Sea, witnessing firsthand what China is doing there. They talk about reclaiming land, and I suggest it's not reclaiming land because there's no land to reclaim. It's creating land. And while they've been doing this for some time, it's kind of gone unnoticed. They're up now to over 3,000 acres that they have created, all staffed with nothing but military stuff in there. So obviously, it concerns a lot of people, and a lot of people in the region. In fact, a lot of our allies in the region look at China as someone more significant than we are, because they don't see that type of thing from us. Now, I know this is not your AOR, General Waldhauser, but recently, and you stated in your opening statement, their request for a presence in Djibouti. This is very much of a concern. Djibouti is where we've had our Marines for quite some time. It's an area that has control over the entrance in the Red Sea and ultimately the Suez Canal. So I'm very much concerned about this, and you are too. You said at the House Armed Services last week, this is your quote, you said, if the Chinese took over that port, then the consequences could be significant. Well, if China is successful in taking over the port of Djibouti, could they use their control to threaten U.S. access and our broader freedom of navigation interests in that region, like the Red Sea and Suez Canal?
Senator Inhofe, thank you very much for the question. Although I'm not an expert on port operations, I can tell you a few things about Djibouti that may lend some context to the question. Within the confines of the Djibouti port, there are 5 activities, 2 of which are run by the Chinese. Obviously, they're Chinese naval port for the facility there, and then they have control over what's called a multi-purpose port, which essentially offloads containers. There are 3 other pieces to the port, one of which is a fuel pier, which the Emirati company owns. Then there's this container pier, which is what has been discussed about the Djiboutian takeover in the past couple of weeks. And then there is what's called an old port, where our ships also berth in order to pick up supplies and the like. The Djiboutians annulled a contract that they had with the Dubai Ports World here last week, and they essentially took control of that port. In discussions with our key leadership in the area and with the Secretary of State who was there this past week, the Djiboutians indicated that they will run that port for the next 6 months and then determine, where they will go in terms of sale or in terms of whether they'll keep control of that port. The container port, as I described, basically all of the containers that comes through there in Djibouti, whether it's spare parts, whether it's provisions, anything that comes in Djibouti comes through that port. So that port is used quite a bit. We also use the fuel port quite a bit. Between October of 16 and October of 17, there were 115 ships that came in there to refuel. The fuel also goes to the port or to the base in Djibouti to refuel airplanes and the like.
So that is a significant area there. And
it is.
I'm running out of time here, but that's what I wanted to get into the record. One of the areas that, in fact, it was Admiral Harris that called this to our attention. In some of the areas where we've done this IMET program, which I've always been very fond of, and I think both of you have, they're seeing that China is going after our IMET program. Actually, and now that's in that area. Are you seeing any of this in Africa, on the continent of Africa? Because we have worked extensively on the IMET program down there.
So it's unclear. It's difficult to get data in terms of China and the IMET program in Africa. On average, the National Defense University in China graduates about 100 or so foreign students a year, some of whom are obviously from Africa. They usually come from about 70 or so countries. Just by the way, we in the United States, we have about 850 officers from China who go through, from Africa, who go through various programs, National Defense University, seminars and the like, at a cost of about $22 million.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, and that's good. Let me do this. For the record, because there's not time to do it now, General Waldhauser, I want you to kind of outline the resources. Because when we built Africom, it was done without resources, and we know who we depend on in cases when we need those resources. So I'd like to get in writing some detail on that. General Votel, I know that you have some still concerns about China and the efforts that you're seeing in China to project their influence in your AOR. Any comments you want to make about your AOR?
Well, Senator Inhofe, the thing that I would just highlight is that the activities in Djibouti are not only important to Africom, they're extraordinarily important to Centcom. This is certainly one of the key areas where we have strong cooperation and collaboration across our geographic combatant command areas here. So I certainly share General Waldhauser's concerns about what is playing out in Djibouti.
Yeah, in your written statement, you also gave some detail on that, and you do make a comment. While Beijing claims that both locations support peacekeeping and humanitarian operations, and you go on, I don't know how many people believe that, but it's a great concern to this committee. Senator Reid.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And General Votel, as I indicated in my opening remarks, consistent with the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, and General Dunford, do you believe that it's in our national security interest to stay within the confines of the JCPOA?
I think from my perspective, the JCPOA addresses one of the principal threats that we deal with from Iran. So if the JCPOA goes away, then we will have to have another way to deal with the nuclear weapons program. So yes, I share their position.
Thank you. With respect to Syria, it's a very complicated situation, and that's an understatement. One issue involves the Kurds. They fought with us very reliably in the Syrian Defense Forces. Now they are moving to assist fellow Kurds against the Turks in Afrin. It appears that we don't have a policy as to our position vis-a-vis the Kurds within Syria, the Syrian Kurds, and also a longer-term policy as to, what do we do? Are we going to have a de facto partition of the country with the SDF, Syrian Defense Forces, guarding that portion? Can you give us some clarity on the policy? I just don't think we have one, to be blunt.
Well, Senator, we have not operated in the province of Afrin in our interactions with the Syrian Democratic Forces. They understand that this is an area in which we do not operate and have no intention of operating at this particular point. The concern certainly that we have is that the activities up in Afrin are a distraction to our defeat ISIS activities right now, and there has been an impact to that. We are addressing that. I think we've got very innovative people and partners on the ground that are working to ensure we keep the focus on ISIS. But I am concerned about the long-term aspects of this.
There is a possibility that the Kurds would gradually leave our efforts in order to protect their fellow Kurdish forces in Afrin. That's a possibility, isn't it?
We've seen that already, Senator.
Thank you. General Waldhauser, thank you for your hospitality when I was passing through Africom. One of the impressions that I received there is that, we're keeping some of these forces on their heels by special operations, particularly in working with ANISOM and with local forces, but that the real long-term struggle is building capacity in every way, shape, or form. And as I pointed out in my opening statement, the sheer lack of State Department presence, ambassadors in Somalia, ambassadors in Libya, ambassadors in Egypt, is that impairing your ability to get the job done?
Thank you, Senator Reid, and thank you and your team for taking the time to come through our AOR. It was very helpful, and we appreciate your support and concern. With regards to Somalia, one of the things, we do two things there primarily. One is the kinetic piece, which we have authorities to strike al-Shabaab targets, and we've done that quite robustly here in the last few months. Additionally, we have a niche in building partnership capacity, but I also would say that the international community plays a big part in that as well. UAE, Turkey, the UK, and so forth also build this capacity. And the key there is that as we talk about AMISOM transition in around the 20 to 21 timeframe, the Somali National Security Forces needs to be at a place where they can conduct their own security operations. With regards to the country team and the ambassador, our country team there we were very, very tight with them. They, as you know, work out of Nairobi, but now they have a facility at Mogadishu, which they just have moved into here in the last week or so. And we work very closely with them. And the Chargé does a great job working with President Farmujo, because the bottom line is the federal government of Somalia needs a lot of help, a lot of mentoring, and a lot of coaching as President Farmujo moves forward.
No, I concur, and we do have a good and very courageous team of diplomats on the ground in Mogadishu, but in order to have the impact we need in a very short period of time, we're going to have to up the game dramatically, and I don't see that happening on the civilian side, and even your resources are limited as we shift to other priorities, and as the national defense strategy moves near-peer competition with Russia and China to the forefront, leaving you both of you with maybe not economy of force operations, but certainly there are different priorities. But thank you all for your service, and please again convey our thanks to the men and women you lead.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. General Votel, I will start with you, and my best to Michelle as well. Please send my greetings. General, when I was in Afghanistan a few months ago, I visited military and diplomatic leaders in Kabul, Kandahar, and Bagram. And it seems as though the Taliban is now transitioning from an ideologically inspired group into a narco-terror group, which is using ideology as a veil. And as such, the Department of Defense is focused on destroying processing facilities and their yields as opposed to just simply destroying the poppy fields. And the State Department is very focused on enforcement in conjunction with the FBI and the DEA. Is this strategy different from those strategies that we've used in the past? And if so, how are they different?
Senator, thank you. They are different. We are using the authorities that have been passed to us recently to ensure that we can go after, as you suggested, these funding streams that are fueling the Taliban right now, and they are proving effective. This is a lesson learned from Iraq and Syria, where when we got serious about going after the funding streams that supported ISIS, we started to see an immediate impact. And so that is exactly the attention here. And I do agree with you. They are well resourced by this narco trafficking that takes place, and so our efforts are not only targeting their production and storage locations, but also working with regional partners to help limit the flow of that product out of the region. Again, trying to impede their ability to benefit from that.
So you think it's fair that we call them a narco-terror group?
I think they are absolutely that way, and they take on many of the characteristics of a mafia type of group. This is not a popular insurgency. I think that's an important thing for people to understand. Over 90% of the people in Afghanistan do not want the Taliban to be in charge of their country. It's not a popular insurgency.
And as we fight and try to eradicate their funding streams, then do you believe that we are adequately funded to achieve success?
I do. I think we've got the necessary resources right now to pursue the strategy that's been laid out for us.
Okay, and then if we are successful in destroying their narcotics industry and their funding sources, what development do we need to see then in Afghanistan to make sure that their people are self-sufficient?
Well, I think the key strategy, the big idea here is to force the Taliban to reconciliation, and the way we do that is by focusing on military pressure, by focusing on political pressure, working with the regional partners such as Pakistan, and it's through social pressure. And this, of course, is ensuring that the government of Afghanistan continues to make the necessary reforms that President Ghani has already committed to, and that he is moving out on as we speak. This includes not only addressing endemic problems with corruption, but also ensuring that fair elections are conducted in the country, and that they are addressing some of the leadership challenges they have. And so they are doing these things right now, and I think this will help build confidence in the government of Afghanistan for the people.
And I do appreciate that. I'm going to focus in a little bit more on the Afghan Special Operations Units. We've had a lot of U.S. effort in Afghanistan building the Afghan Air Force and increasing the size of their Afghan Special Operations Units. And how will the creation of the Afghan Air Force and doubling the size of their Special Ops units change the conditions on the ground as we see them today?
Well, I think a key part of our operational approach here is to build on what is working in Afghanistan, and certainly their Afghan Special Operations Forces and the Air Force have been very, very good programs. And essentially, what we are focused on doing by doubling the Afghan Special Operations Forces and by building out the Air Force is to really provide the government of Afghanistan with a very good offensive capability that can really focus on gaining control of the population in the areas that we need to for the government to exert their writ. So we look at the Special Operations Forces and the Air Force as their kind of principal offensive capability. Then the Army plays the role as the hold force, and then we are working to get the police to become more competent in their policing functions that are important in the urban and populated areas.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. When I was in Afghanistan, I was able to visit with some of those pilots, and they're truly excited about being able to support their own country. So thank you, gentlemen, very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for your service and for being here today. General Waldhauser, I and a number of other women senators had the opportunity last week to meet with 2 young women who had been kidnapped by Boko Haram. They had horrific stories to tell us about seeing family members murdered before their eyes, about being forced into marriage, about being gang raped on an ongoing basis. I asked them what they would like Americans to know about what's happening in Nigeria. They were both Nigerian. And what one of them said to me is that people in the United States should understand that this is not just the Chibok girls, several hundred who, as most of us remember, were kidnapped several years ago. But this is happening to thousands of girls on a daily basis in Nigeria. And one of the translator who was with them, who was with the organization that brought them to the United States, said that this is a strategy by Boko Haram to impregnate women to grow a whole next generation with that extremist ideology. So I know that in your statement you talk about Nigeria's capabilities and capacities growing, but in fact they have not really been able to address this mass kidnapping of girls in Nigeria. Is that your understanding? And what are we doing to try and support efforts to address what Boko Haram is doing?
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Good to see you again. Obviously, Boko Haram is one of the most deplorable organizations on the planet. Since 2009, they've killed, depending on what you read or what statistics you look at, well over 20,000 people, and they've displaced millions. And they're notorious for the things that you talked about. With regards to the Chibok girls, you know, almost 4 years ago this month, in April of 4 years ago, 276 were taken away. 163 have been returned, about 60%, and in a closed session I can discuss with you what we think or where we think the other 113 girls are. On February 19th, this happened again in Dapchi. Dapchi is a location that's about 150 miles north of where Chibok is. And although no group has claimed responsibility based on the location and based in several open sources, we believe it to be ISIS West Africa. ISIS West Africa was at one time part of Boko Haram, but they split for a whole host of reasons. One of the things I will tell you is that we have been asked to provide assistance to the government of Nigeria to try to help find these girls. And we can talk more about that in a closed session, but we are providing assistance in terms of intelligence, support, planning, and the like that they have asked us for. They are trying to find a negotiated solution here. That's their desire. But as you say, the security situation, especially in Borno State and Yobe State, where this took place, is very, very precarious.
And when we passed the NDAA in 2017, we created a new authority under Section 385 that allows the Secretary of Defense to transfer up to $75 million to USAID and to the Department of State to implement foreign assistance programs. Are these programs that would be helpful as we're looking at the challenges facing women and girls in places like Nigeria, where they need to be reintegrated into their societies, and there are challenges with doing that? And can you tell me, either of you tell me, if the Secretary of Defense has requested any of those dollars?
So thank you. The 385 program, as you said, is a new one this year. So we've had to work our way through several of the wickets to see how we could apply it and so on. We currently have 2 proposals that we have put through OSD. One of them has to do with defections inside Niger, where we would like to work with the State Department to follow through on our activities. They would complement our activities. So that one is one we put forward. A second one we put forward is in Nigeria, but it's in the Gulf of Guinea basin, where we're trying to get some of the people there who to court on a legal perspective, and the State Department can help us there as they run illegal drugs, weapons, and the like. So we've got 2 nominations in, and we're hopeful that this is something that can complement our overall kinetic effort as part of the development or diplomacy piece of our activities.
Well, I think if this committee can be helpful with that, I hope you will let us know. General Votel, I have only a few seconds left, but I wonder if you could tell us what happened in Syria when our forces engaged with Russia pro-regime forces, and it appeared that those were Russian contractors. Is this a new mechanism that Russia's using to engage contractors to serve as mercenaries on the ground for them?
Senator, thank you. I can't speculate on what Russia's intentions might be, but in this particular situation, this was, in my view, a very clear situation of the U.S. coalition forces with our partners on the ground defending themselves. We were attacked in this particular case. My view is that our forces responded properly in this case. They immediately identified what was happening. They immediately got on the net with the Russians and were talking with them before, during, after the event, and very, very effectively brought together the right capabilities, whether it was ISR or fire support, to address this. So I think our people responded extraordinarily well.
I'm not criticizing our response.
I don't know if this is some kind of change in their piece. I would just, in how they're approaching this, I would just tell you that we remain extraordinarily vigilant to these types of threats, and we retain the sufficient capabilities to protect ourselves and our partners on the ground against these types of activities.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Graham.
Thank you, sir. General Votel, is there any credible opposition to Assad left in Syria?
Senators, you know our mission is defeat of ISIS. Certainly,
that's not my question.
Right.
My question is, are there any credible opposition left to Assad in Syria?
The only opposition that I am aware of is those that are out in the vicinity of Damascus and the Ghouta area, and then up in the Idlib area that still control some terrain, so they do pose some kind of threat to the regime.
Who's winning in Syria? The civil war.
Well, again, from a civil war standpoint, it would appear that the regime is ascendant here.
Do you see any likelihood that the forces you just named can topple Assad in the next year?
That's not my assessment, Senator.
Is Iran helping Assad?
Iran has been a key enabler of the regime for a while.
Is Russia helping Assad?
They also are a key enabler of the regime.
Is it too strong a statement to say that with Russia and Iran's help, Assad has won the civil war in Syria?
I don't think that is too strong of a statement. I think they have provided him the wherewithal to be ascendant at this point.
Is it still our policy that Assad must go?
I know that that's our particular policy at this particular point. Our focus remains on the defeat of ISIS.
Well, if you don't know, I doubt if anybody knows, because this is your job to take care of this part of the world. What does it mean if Iran and Russia and Assad have won in Syria? What does it mean to us and to the region?
It means that we will contend with this with this influence of Iran in this particular area and with the influence of Russia.
What does it mean to Israel?
Well, certainly from an Iranian standpoint, it means that Iran could be in a position where they could support Lebanese Hezbollah better and then pose a greater threat to Israel.
They're actually doing that as we speak, the Iranians.
We've certainly seen some activities that would certainly support that.
What does it mean for Jordan?
It means that, again, there are unstable regimes to their north, and that pose threats to them as well.
Thank you for your clarity and your honesty. And it is not your mission in Syria to deal with the Iranian Assad-Russia problem. That's not in your things to do, right?
That's correct, Senator.
Do you think it should be?
At this point, I think if that was the decision that was made by the coalition leadership here, with the U.S.-led coalition leadership, then we would pursue that.
Detainees, we've rolled up about 400 and something detainees in Syria. The Syrian Democratic Forces have about 400 and something people in their charge. Is that correct?
Senator, I think you're referring to about 400 or so foreign terrorist fighters that they have within their detention.
These are the people that did not die for the cause but were captured as we liberate Raqqa and other areas. Is that correct? And
as they attempted to escape the areas in which we are operating right now.
Do you think we have a credible plan to detain these people?
We actually do have a plan to detain them on the ground, and we are working with our partners in the government here to work to get them back to their country so they can be prosecuted in
If
accordance
they don't
with their
go
laws.
back to their countries, do you think we have a plan, credible plan to detain them inside of Syria long-term?
We are working on improving the capacity of the Syrian Democratic Forces to do that right now.
Okay. Africa, General Waldhauser. The Sahel is made up of how many countries?
Mali, well, five or so, yes.
Of those 5 countries, how many would you characterize as failed states?
I don't think there's a failed state there yet, but there's certainly fragile states in that area.
If the trends continue, will they become failed states?
It's possible.
Do we have a strategy to prevent that?
Our strategy is to support the G5 Sahel. We do that bilaterally with these countries in order for them to take...
Is it working?
It's in the infancy stages. I mean, this G5 program has just begun. It's something that you have 5,000 individuals covering a very large territory.
So 5,000 people are covering 5 countries.
That's correct, the border areas.
I'm not a military guy, but that doesn't sound enough. Does it matter if the Sahel becomes a region of failed states to us, and if so, why?
It does matter because the groups that are in that area, ISIS, JNIM, and the like, some of these have aspirations to conduct things regionally as well as into Europe and into our homeland. It is very important that we contain or that we degrade and we work with our partners, because if we had a failed state and if these groups took over that failed state, then you have a situation where it's just vast wastelands where people can plan attacks against the United States.
One last question. Is Libya a failed state, fragile state, state on the mend?
It's very difficult to characterize Libya, but I'd have to say a fragile state. I mean, Salome, who's the UN representative, has got a plan to try to work through restructuring of the political committee's constitution and potentially a vote later this year. But the bottom line is, unless the security is there, unless a fair election can take place, and unless those individuals who are part of the process will agree to the outcome of the election, then it wouldn't serve any purpose at this point.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Votel and General Waldhauser, for your work. For nearly 3 years, a Saudi Arabia-led coalition has been bombing Yemen to counter Iranian-backed Houthi militias. The United States military has been providing intelligence, mid-air refueling, and munitions to the Saudis. As I understand it, refueling operations are governed by something called a bilateral acquisition and cross-servicing agreement. The United States has one with both Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And I've read over these documents, and there are a few things they don't seem to cover that I want to ask you about. So, General Votel, does Centcom track the purpose of the missions that it is refueling? In other words, where a U.S. refueled aircraft is going, what targets it strikes, and the results of the mission?
Senator, we do not.
Okay. Reuters recently reported on a Saudi coalition airstrike in late February that killed 5 civilians and wounded 14, including 4 children. According to witnesses that were interviewed by Reuters, the coalition conducted 2 additional airstrikes that hit paramedics who were trying to save civilians in the rubble. General Votel, when you receive reports like this from credible media organizations or outside observers, is Centcom able to tell whether U.S. fuel or U.S. munitions were used as part of that strike?
Senator, I don't believe we are.
Okay. So the reason I ask about this is the Yemeni people are suffering, and this is a humanitarian crisis. That's why I co-sponsored the Sanders-Lee resolution that directs President Trump to stop our involvement in Saudi military operations in Yemen unless Congress provides specific authorization. The bill would allow our counterterrorism operations against al-Qaeda and its affiliates to continue, but it would ensure that the United States is not giving the Saudis a blank check to bomb Yemen and worsen the humanitarian crisis. I know that Iran's sanctions against Yemen are destabilizing. They're making the conflict worse, and that's unacceptable. But we need to be clear about this. Saudi Arabia is the one receiving American weapons and American support. And that means we bear some responsibility here. And that means we need to hold our partners and our allies accountable for how those resources are used. I have one other question I'd like to turn to, if I can, and that is, earlier this year, Secretary of State Tillerson implied that U.S. troops would stay in Syria indefinitely. In addition to our forces, Hezbollah, Russian forces, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and now Turkish troops are also operating on the ground, and we've already had several run-ins with these forces. With my remaining time, I have just one question. General, how is Centcom deconflicting between these various forces that are operating on the ground, and what is your strategy for de-escalation if a confrontation occurs?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. First off, the principal way we are deconflicting is through direct communications. As you're aware, we do have a direct communication line with the Russian Federation forces on the ground. This has, I would characterize our conversations with them as militarily professional. They take place several times a day, and they have been going on for a couple of years. And I do think this has been a very effective way of ensuring that we can deconflict and prevent things from happening in the ground space and in the airspace. We also have the same thing with our Turkish partners to the north. In areas where we are in close proximity, again, we have very good communications with them. We're able to deconflict. We're able to ensure that people have good situation awareness. They understand what we're doing with our partners on the ground, and this direct communication really allows us to ensure that we can minimize the opportunities for escalation or for miscalculation on the ground. And I think these are working very, very effectively.
Okay, so this is mostly about communications. You know, I just worry, General, because the situation in Syria is extraordinarily dangerous. And I'm not sure that throwing a small number of U.S. troops in the middle of it is a sustainable long-term solution. I believe we need a clear strategy here for ending the violence and for holding Assad accountable. But I appreciate your work in this area. Thank you very much, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, let me begin by thanking you both for your service to our country as well as to your families as well for their sacrifice and your time away from home. I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about Africom and General Waldhauser. I'm curious, I've had the opportunity to accompany Senator Inhofe on several of his most recent trips to Africa. I think Senator Inhofe has now made over 150 different nation stops in Africa over the last 20-plus years. And what I find interesting in each of our trips has been the amount of interest that those countries and those leaders in those countries have in relationships with our country. In the case of Africom and our abilities, right now, as I understand it, if you need resources, and you do in an area of the world in which things aren't getting quieter, they're getting more intense, you basically borrow from other operations in and around for the resources that you need. Would you explain for us how Africom actually receives the resources that it needs right now?
Thank you, Senator Rounds. There are two or three ways we receive forces. One of them is if we're assigned forces, and we do not have assigned forces, but we have allocated forces. So, for example, the Marine Corps Special Purpose MAGTF, which mission has to do with protection of U.S. citizens and property on the continent, we are allocated that organization. We have a special operations.
How large is that force?
That force is a company-size unit, 6 MV-22s and some C-130s. But it's got a lot of ground to cover on the continent.
An entire continent?
An entire continent. We've used that, or we've moved that around to help on the entire continent. We also have a force in Djibouti, an East African response force from the Army. That's a company-sized unit, and that's also tied to the issue of protection of U.S. citizens and property. We have Special Operations Command, which has a large part of what we do in terms of the forces that come to do the train, advise, and assist. We also have episodic forces that come from the Army, for example, to train units. They just trained, for example, for about 6 weeks a battalion in Nigeria. So although we don't have assigned forces, we are allocated forces, and we compete for those through the Global Force Management process, which the Joint Staff runs on behalf of the Secretary.
Is it time to take a look at actually standing up Africom the same as the other combatant commands are stood up?
Well, in that regard, I mean, I think we are the same as the other combatant commands. I mean, we have a COCOM staff of same size, relatively speaking. We're located obviously in Stuttgart, Germany. But in terms of, and we have great interagency partners with us as well as military force. But Africom staff per se is one that is like the other COCOMs. I think perhaps what you may be referring to is our components. So our components in some cases are dual-hatted. The Air Force is dual-hatted Europe and Africa. The Navy.
Do you find that working in its current capacity, or can you make it better?
Well, it works. There's no doubt about it. The lead has changed. We move assets around between the programs. We have authority on these. We do less than 30 days. We don't need the Secretary's approval to do so.
And we work with UCOM, and we work with General Votel and his team all the time. If we have kinetic operations, for example, in Somalia that require a little bit more, we'll schedule those and we'll organize those around a period where we can gain assets from Centcom, for example. So the continent of Africa is extremely large, and it's virtually impossible to cover the whole thing all the time, and with other priorities around the globe for the United States. But we have to be smart, innovative, and we have to have good relationships with our fellow combatant commanders in order to make it work.
Are we placing the appropriate emphasis on Africa? Look, right now, we know there's hot spots. Long term, this is a developing part of the world, which seems to me other superpowers, other nations, are paying a great deal of attention to, China in particular. Are we doing the same?
Well, I think back to your original point. First of all, all the countries on the continent, for the most part, really want to be associated with the United States. They want our assistance, they want our leadership, but they don't really expect a lot. I mean, the little things can go a long way, and I think in the countries that you and Senator Inhofe have visited, perhaps you've seen that in spades. But we have to remain engaged there for a whole host of reasons, which I think you understand. And I think a little goes a long way on the continent, because at the end of the day, we're trying to develop capacity for their security forces to take care of their security problems.
Thank you. My time has expired. I thank you both once again for your service to our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
General Waldhauser, I do want to have a personal discussion with you in the next few days, because I don't agree with you in the way this is set up. I was here when we established Africom, and there was a debate about dedicated assets at that time, and I'd like to go over it to get clarification on that issue. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both gentlemen for being here today and for your service. General Waldhauser, I'd like to talk a little bit about Nigeria and add to some of the questions that my colleague asked you about. I had the opportunity to travel to Nigeria as part of my work in this committee last year, and I was very concerned about ISIS West Africa, which you mentioned is basically a splinter group from Boko Haram. And at that time, it looked as if the situation was deteriorating. So my question to you is, what is the status? Where are we in relation to ISIS West Africa? Is the situation getting better?
ISIS West Africa is of those two groups. If you divide them in half, Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa is the group that is of more concern to us. We see they have ties to the ISIS core. They have some funding from ISIS core. They have indicated in the past their desire to go outside the region to conduct activities, attacks, if you will, on U.S. interests in the area. They certainly are more of our concern to us at this particular time.
Are we applying adequate resources to deal with the issue?
Their strategy for ISIS West Africa is with the Lake Chad Basin region, where we apply our assistance to the countries around there, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria. We have made progress with Nigeria in the last year or so with regards to our ability to share intelligence with them, to assist them in planning, and also to assist in training.
You mentioned in your written testimony that the multinational task force in that area in the basin doesn't seem to be as interested in dealing with the situation. They believe it's a Nigeria-centric problem. I gather you don't agree. What can we do to convince them otherwise? Based on your testimony here today, it sounds as if they do want to operate across the broader region.
Well, they do want to operate the countries that support the multinational joint task force, but in most cases, these countries have significant other challenges, whether it be in Nigeria itself, in the coastal area or in the central area, whether it's a country like Chad, for example, who has concerns about their border with Libya. Niger has all kind of issues throughout their country. And so the ability to have large military forces that can do all of these things is difficult for these countries. So sometimes if it appears that, let's just say over a period of months, the trend line has been in a negative way, if you will, on how Boko Haram has been acting, these countries may decide to move their assets other places because their interests and their security concerns, Boko Haram, for example, may not be on the top of the list based on some internal issues that are going on within those countries.
You mentioned Chad, which is in a very dangerous part of the world and the region that we are focused on. It has always been my understanding, and some briefings that I've had related to some of the operations in the Sahel, that Chad has been a pretty capable and productive partner for U.S. operations. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, but their main concern, I think, at the moment would be the issue of foreign fighters coming from Libya into their northern area.
So having a relationship with them is important because that could also have an impact to the United States. And I know that yesterday Secretary Tillerson, I guess former Secretary Tillerson, indicated that the United States is considering removing Chad from the travel ban. Now, I have been concerned about some of the rhetoric we've seen from the President in relation to Muslims and African nations, including using some very disparaging language in reference to African nations. And I think it can damage certainly our standing and working in that part of the world. I'd kind of like your thoughts as to any impact on the relations we've had with Chad as a result of them being included in the travel ban, and how important our partnership with countries like Chad and others in dealing with what could be very serious issues arising out of the African continent.
Senator, we continue to work with all the countries, Chad included, and show them our commitment and demonstrate our desire for them to help them build capacity. One example I would give to Chad, it's a small example and it's very simple, but it demonstrates, I think, Africom's commitment. A few months ago, there was a huge storm in Chad and various aircraft hangars, and they have a very, very small air force. But a few aircraft hangars were destroyed, and they simply have no way to repair them. We were able to gather some funds and quickly send a team down there and erect several shelters that would replace these hangars that had been destroyed in the storm. And that's a small way to demonstrate our commitment and Africom's commitment to that country, to let them know that we certainly are behind them and have a desire for their capacity to be built.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Thank you for being here this morning. General Waldhauser, the National Defense Strategy describes the greatest threat to U.S. prosperity and security as the reemergence of long-term strategic competition by revisionist powers. These revisionists include Russia and China, two countries we see more and more activity in the continent of Africa. China just opened a new naval base in Djibouti, mere miles from our only enduring military presence in Africa, while Russia has been courting leadership from both sides of the conflict in Libya and announcing major new investments in Zimbabwe. These Russian and Chinese efforts are self-interested, as these countries are doing very little to counter the myriad of terrorist threats across the region. Groups such as Boko Haram, ISIS West Africa, and al-Shabaab continue to operate freely. What is your assessment of the Russian and Chinese activities in Africa? First question. And second, as we shift our national defense strategy to the two revisionists, how are we working to make sure that the terrorist activities in Africa do not find their way to our country?
Thank you, Senator. First part, I'll talk about Russia rather briefly. So first of all, Russia's interest in the continent has to do with intelligence exchanges with various countries with arms sales and also with energy partnerships. You mentioned Zimbabwe. There's a platinum mine there that they've had some activities in. They've got a $4 billion investment there, and they're also interested in arms sales because there hasn't really been any arms sales from the West since about the mid-2000s there. So they're trying to, open those type of markets any way they can to show that the U.S. perhaps is not a good partner or someone that is not willing to work with them. My personal concern with the Russians is what they're trying to do in the northern part of the country, from Egypt to Libya, Tunisia, Algeria. It's that part of northern Africa on the Mediterranean, which is on the southern part of NATO. They've got interests there. And as you said, in Libya, they're playing on one hand, they talk about supporting the UN agreement, but on the other hand, the support that they provide for Haftar and the HOR forces is something that needs to be addressed. With regards to China, they obviously have a lot of investments. They're interested in the One Belt, One Road. That gives them the ability to diversify economically imports and exports. And I think that's been very well documented. So they obviously have a big part in there too. But there's areas where we can work with China. I mean, we have a unique situation where their base in Djibouti is just a mile or so from ours. And so if there's interests that have to do with humanitarian, peacekeeping, safekeeping with regards to air flight and range usage by their ground forces there, we have to find a way to communicate that with them. And so on one hand, we're certainly aware of the great power competition, but we have a unique situation where they're a neighbor of us in Djibouti. With regards to the future and what the National Defense Strategy says, really, if you look at what Africa is described in there, we are told to conduct a by, with, and through strategy. We are told to develop relationships, work with our partner forces to continue the VEO struggle with, there. So even though a lot of it is China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, the part on Africa basically tells us to continue what we have been doing, to include building partnership capacity to defeat the terrorist organizations.
So General, do you see the Chinese, as the proximity to our base, as an opportunity for partnership as well as Chinese being a competitor?
It is, and that's the unique part. It's the only place on the planet where China has an overseas base. It's right next to ours. And so not only do you have China and U.S. in Djibouti, there's Japan, there's the French, and the Italians are all located there as well. The Chinese have started to work closely with the French in terms of some of the exercises they do there. This is a small level operations. But again, I think that it's the unique situation is what we do with China obviously has to be informed by our overall global strategy, but the unique situation that we have with those individuals being next door and participating in peacekeeping operations and anti-piracy operations, we've got to find a way to work with them as well.
Thank you. General Votel, I only have a few seconds left, 30 seconds, as opposed to naming the conflicts and the extraordinary complexity in your region. I'll just ask a question. As you consider the strategic environment in the Middle East and competing interests among even our nominal allies, such as Turkey, would you provide your assessment of Russia, Turkish, and Iranian goals in the Middle East, and if you see their goals as mutually supporting the overall conflict?
Well, first off, Senator, Turkey as a NATO ally is our relationship is deeply valued. They've been a key partner in the fight against ISIS here for a long period of time, and we do recognize they have they do have legitimate concerns with security along their border from terrorism, and of course this has led to a little bit of a tension between us at this particular point that we're working through, largely diplomatically, but also militarily at this particular point. I guess what I would highlight is what I mentioned in my opening remarks, and that is Russia does play a role here. And again, it's cute to say arsonist and fireman is kind of what they try to do, is instigate. They're trying to instigate tension among partners in the region, and then trying to play a role in trying to be an arbiter in that.
Yes.
And so this is what happens, and this is what plays out on a regular basis. And so we really do have to take a look at our long-term relationships and make sure that we are focused in on that, and staying as strong as we can on those. So I am concerned about this role that Russia plays in northern Syria and how it impacts all of our relationships, and especially the relationship between us and Turkey.
Thank you, General. I'll submit a couple of questions for the record
Thank you.
as it relates to Turkey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Votel, I want to follow up on a couple of the questions that Senator Warren asked about Yemen. What would be the implications and the impact if the United States stopped providing the aerial refueling, the intelligence, and the advice to the Saudi forces?
Senator, I think right now that the provision of those things that you just covered right now gives us placement, it gives us access, and it gives us influence with Saudi Arabia. And what I would highlight to you is that we have been working with them, sharing our own experiences.
But you testified that earlier that we don't. When we refuel a Saudi plane, we don't have any control over the mission, where it goes, what it does next. I mean, but if the argument is this allows us to maintain control, are we maintaining some level of control?
Well, the influence that we derive with them is by working with them to demonstrate how we do our targeting process.
Do they listen? Have they ever changed
absolutely
the mission based upon our input?
They absolutely do, and in the work that we've been doing with them related to the ballistic missile threat, we have seen some very good progress in this area. Recently, Saudi Arabia has followed many of the things that we have done in terms of how we stand up architectures to investigate civilian casualties. These are problems that we have on occasion, even as good as we are.
So the principal argument against this move to limit or cut off that aid is if we do, the Saudi conduct might be worse. Is that?
It is better for, and Senator, from my perspective, it is better for us to stay engaged with them and continue to influence this. They want this type of support, and they want to improve their capabilities.
You said for us. How about for the people of Yemen?
I think it's absolutely essential that we stay engaged in this for them, and I think this does give us the best opportunity to address these concerns.
Thank you. Turning to Iran, I understand Iran is, all the testimony is Iran is abiding by the JCPOA in terms of inspections and what they're doing. What would be the implications for the region if the United States abruptly terminated the agreement, and what would Iran do?
Senator, I can't speculate on what Iran would do. The implications for the region. I think there would be some concern. I think about how we intended to address that particular threat if it was not being addressed through the JCPOA. Of course, our approach here is one of assuring our partners, maintaining deterrent capabilities in the region, and then, of course, where we can.
But if the agreement were terminated, wouldn't the Iranians then be free to pursue a nuclear weapon within a matter of months?
Theoretically, they would be able to do that.
And that certainly wouldn't contribute to, if the Iranians had a nuclear weapon, we'd have 2 rogue states with nuclear weapons on our hands instead of 1. The other one being North Korea.
Right. This could certainly be the case. Again, we're speculating that would be the direction there.
Do you think it would be in the national security interests of the country to maintain the Iran agreement, at least for the near term?
I share the Secretary of Defense's and Chairman's comments on this, that right now I think it is in our interests.
And there may be a different point of view in 4 or 5 years when it's near the end of its term. Is that correct?
That could be true.
Thank you. Turning to Pakistan, by the way, you have one of the most complicated jobs in the world, I think. You can go from one area to the other. I haven't even mentioned Syria. Is Pakistan still supporting terrorist activity in Afghanistan, and has the recent Get Tough with Pakistan policy influenced their behavior?
It has. The pressure that has been put on Pakistan, I think, through our South Asia strategy and some of our public communication, I think has helped gain their attention. And as I've mentioned previously, we have seen some positive indicators as a result of this. I cannot tell you that we have seen decisive changes in the areas in which we're working, but I remain very well engaged with my partner to ensure that we are moving forward on this.
But there appears to be a surge of attacks in Afghanistan. You don't associate those with Pakistan?
Well, again, having sanctuary in Pakistan or having support from other actors in the region certainly is an aspect of the Taliban's success here. So I think we have to look at all of these to ensure we attribute the causes of these attacks to where it is. We also have ISIS that does have a different approach as well.
Final question, should we be even tougher with Pakistan? Should we ratchet up the pressure because they still are providing sanctuary? It's still unclear whose side they're on in that region.
Senator, I think right now, I think the strategy that we have is an appropriate one, and I think we have the mechanism to continue to keep them focused on our objectives, our mutual objectives here. So I do think we are pursuing this in the right way, and I think some of the positive indicators that we have begun to see, although it hasn't led to decisive changes yet, are things that we have to pay attention to as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, good to see you. Thanks for your service. General Waldhauser, I just want to ask a very basic question. I know there's an answer to it that I'm sure I'm missing, but why is Africom not located in Africa?
Well, as you know, this is the 10th year of the Africa Command as it stood up. And there's been several attempts to perhaps move it to the continent. But
what's the roadblock? Is it countries
the
that don't want us there, or is it the Congress not helping you, or what? It always seems to me a little disjointed that it's in Germany.
Well, I think the roadblocks are, first of all, there's a financial aspect of this, the cost of it do that. But then the second and third order effects, if you move to a country in Africa, then what does that mean to surrounding countries or other partners? They may view that as something that's perhaps skeptical. I think, just to restate it, 10 years ago when the command was stood up, and Senator Inhofe is well aware of this, there was a lot of skepticism on the continent as to what the intent was for a military command for that particular area. And so it surfaces every once in a while, but to my knowledge, there's been no effort at the moment to move.
If you let me use 10 seconds of your time, I would say that the reason is perceived colonialism. And I was on your side back when we set this up 10 years ago, and I lost that battle.
Well, maybe we should relook at that. It just seems to me, anyways, probably a longer conversation. General Votel, I want to congratulate you and the men and women under your command on the campaign with regard to ISIS. You know, it's really remarkable what you've achieved over the last year. I don't think the press has done an adequate job of highlighting that, but it's quite commendable. And so I want to please pass that on to your men and women who are serving with you. But the next question is, so we're going to have troops remaining in Syria. There seems to be a bit of a disconnect regarding what that mission is. You know, obviously we don't want ISIS to return, so that's got to be a key component. But in your testimony, there's a lot of focus on Iran. Obviously they're in Syria, or their proxies, and former Secretary Tillerson now gave a speech not too long ago at the Hoover Institution at Stanford and was very focused on Iran and how our mission there in Syria should be about countering the Iranian threat. So I get a little bit nervous when we have troops on the ground in a very kind of complicated, hostile region where it's not 100% clear what the mission of our troops are. You know, we don't want to, I don't think anyone wants us to get back to the situation like we had with the Marines in Lebanon 3 or 4 decades ago, where their mission was quote-unquote presence, and obviously that didn't turn out very well for our troops there. What is the mission of our troops in Syria, and are they focused on countering the Iranian threat, which is probably the biggest threat that we have there, isn't it?
Senator, thank you. Our mission in Syria is strictly focused on defeating ISIS.
Okay, but what's the biggest threat in Syria right now?
Well, the biggest threat in Syria right now is all the other instability that is taking place, that is preventing the country from moving forward on.
And isn't Iran
political? Well, certainly
behind that?
Iran is an aspect of this, but so is Russia, and so is the regime itself. Our mission, of course, has been focused on ISIS, and so we still have them. We still have ISIS that we are addressing. So that's where our particular focus is. I would tell you that while we don't have a specific task to do something against Iran in this particular area, our strong relationships with the Syrian Democratic Forces, certainly our strong relationships with the Iraqi security forces, do put us in a position where we can, through our strong relationships, can have influence, can encourage them to conduct operations and do things that are in the interests of their countries as opposed to other parties in the area. So
can I just ask a final question? My time's running out. Sure. We know now that during the 2004, 2005, 2006 timeframe that the Iranians were supplying Iraqi Shia militias some of the most sophisticated, deadly IEDs on the battlefield that ended up killing and maiming thousands of American troops. So these are, in my view, the blood of American soldiers and Marines and sailors, airmen. The Iranians had that on their hands, right? That's a fact. They of course denied it back then, but it's a fact that we all know now. I just want to make sure, in terms of our rules of engagement, if there's any threat posed by any Iranian or Iranian-backed proxies, do our troops have the full authority to respond, to defend themselves, and kill these threats? Again, given that they have a history of killing our troops, do they have that
Senator,
clear rule of engagement authority?
They do, and we have actually demonstrated that, most recently in the Middle Euphrates Valley. But as you'll recall, last year, down around the Atanf area, we did have pro-regime forces supported by Iranian Shia groups that attempted to encroach on us, and we did use the full capabilities within our arsenal to protect ourselves. So I think our people clearly understand this, and they have all the authorities they need to protect themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service, in particular in very difficult areas of the world and parts of the world that are very important to the United States. General Votel, talking about America's mission in Syria, that was just the subject of Senator Sullivan's questioning. Isn't one of our missions or one of our responsibilities in Syria to prevent war crimes?
Certainly, it is certainly within the forces that we work with. Certainly,
and war crimes are occurring in Syria with the support and apparent encouragement of Russia, correct?
I think if you look at some of the activities that take place over in the Damascus area and the Ghouta area, I think they would. We certainly would think that is the case.
In fact, last week, UN investigators linked Russia, specifically the Russian Air Force, to possible war crimes, citing the November attack near Aleppo, when a Russian fighter killed at least 84 people and injured more than 150. In the last 3 weeks, as you've observed, more than 1,000 people were killed in eastern Ghouta with Russian military support. My question is, what can and are we doing to deter Russia from engaging?
Well, Senator, as you know, we don't operate in that particular part of Syria militarily, but certainly, through our diplomatic channels, through our ambassador in the UN, Russia has been frankly, been one of the authors of this recent ceasefire. So their inability to enforce it, to enforce standards on this, really means either one of two things. One, they lack the ability to do that, or they are choosing not to do that. And so I think one of the things that we do have to do is hold them accountable for the actions that they are taking here and for the humanitarian disaster that they are perpetuating through their support to the regime and through their own activities.
What would you recommend to hold them accountable?
Well, I think certainly the best way of doing this is through political and diplomatic channels, and certainly if there are other things that are considered, we will do what we're told. I don't recommend that at this particular point, but I think holding them accountable to the things that they have agreed to, particularly through the offices of the United Nations or others here, I think is a very important way of approaching this.
So far, they have not been responding to whatever political or diplomatic steps have been taken, correct?
It does not appear that they are, Senator.
So in order to have some effect, the intensity of whatever we're doing diplomatically and politically has to be heightened, or there need to be some kind of military responses to protect people in that area from the war crimes that are being perpetrated. Would you agree?
There certainly needs to be addressed.
And in terms of diplomacy, I think others may have raised this before me. Isn't the lack of ambassadors in the area, the lack of sufficient diplomatic capacity in this State Department an obstacle to really effectively using diplomacy?
Senator, I can't comment on the broader aspects of the Department of State. That's more appropriate for them. But what I can comment is on the 18 country teams that we work with of the 20 countries that are in the region. We don't have a country team for Iran or for Syria. We have extraordinarily good relationships. 12 of these countries do have ambassadors. 6 do have chargés. The relationships that we have with them, I think, are very good. We get good advice. We have good coordination with them in our day-to-day activities. So I think our relationships, certainly from a military standpoint, remain very, very strong with our diplomatic partners across the region.
So 6 out of the 18 ambassadorships are vacant?
6 out of 18 that have country teams in here are being led by chargés at this point.
Doesn't that reflect an absence of leadership in the Department of State?
I think that's probably a more appropriate question for them than for me, Senator.
Thank you, General. Thanks for your very helpful and forthright answers. Thank you.